Shebreh, same question, and if you have anything that you wanted to add about anything to that, you could as well.
Sure. I have worked with the supervisors, each of the supervisors, way before I was an elected official. So the public health work I've done in this community over the last 20 years has given me the opportunity to work with not just the supervisors, but every city as well, Capitola, Scotts Valley, Watsonville, and of course our city of Santa Cruz, before I was an elected official. I've created policies in every city and created policies at the Board of Supervisors. So I have an established relationship, and that's apparent when you look at my endorsement list. I have a diverse range of endorsements from levels of all government in our county and outside of our county. Specifics: alcohol outlet density, cannabis dispensary, cannabis cultivation, children's fund, safe parking program, and coordination around fire. So I've been doing the work with the current supervisors. So I have established relationship, and I know that I can do the work with any incoming supervisor. The other thing I want to mention is that it's not just the supervisors. You have to work with county staff. And I have deep knowledge and understanding of the county departments. I've brought in just recently, a couple months ago, a $6 million grant that was in partnership with public defender, DA, courts, probation, the sheriff's office, to help people who are in the criminal justice system who have mental health and substance abuse challenges so that they can get the services they need and be prevented and diverted from the criminal justice system. That's one of many grants that I brought in, and it's been in partnership with the county department. So it's important to understand the departments and to be able to work with staff along with your Board of Supervisor colleagues.
Thank you. Could you talk a little bit about the county core funding, which is became quite a controversial issue this year? How would you improve the use of those funds going forward, Shebreh?
Well, I have pages and pages of notes and just did an interview with county staff on core funding. You know, it's really difficult when we have a finite amount of funds for so many organizations that do really, really great work. I think what we need to look at is what are the problems we're trying to solve for, and how is it aligned with the strategic plan at the county or the city, and have organizations produced results in the past or shown that they can produce results. So those are some things that I would shift in how we do the core funding. This doesn't really relate to the county, but with the city, I think what we can do better is to really align it with our 3-year strategic plan. So how are we going to invest that million that we want in organizations? The other is that how we communicate and coordinated with applicants can be improved upon. So as a grant writer, I took a deep dive in the RFP process and talked to applicants. It wasn't really quite clear what the scoring criteria were, for example, one example. So that's something that we could shift in the application process. And then I know that the county held a number of workshops for applicants, but there seemed to be smaller organizations who were busy doing the work and didn't have consultant grant writers to support them, and it was cumbersome for them to go through the application process. So those are some maybe technical things I would change.
Justin.
Before my time starts, I just want to ask if you could, the second part of that last question, I don't think Shebreh got to answer it, so I'm just wondering if that's something we can come back to.
Correct. You're correct. We will
Okay.
come back to that. The
Yeah.
question about consensus on the board.
Yeah.
You're right.
So can you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Yes, sorry. Core funding has become a controversial issue for the community. How would you change, improve the way that those funds are distributed going forward?
Yeah, so I was pretty disappointed in that process. Unfortunately, the way it was rolled out at the city council meeting when this came to us, and we were told that we had to, that there was, a decision was made by this, body that reviewed all these applications, and that we had to vote on, that what we were being recommended was what we were supposed to vote on. I asked, well, can we see the applications? And the county staff said no. And when we asked why, they said, well, we want to keep some of these applications, from the public because they weren't that great. And my question was, my comment to that was, well, it's our money, it's our tax dollars. If people are applying for funding that's people's taxes, we have the right to see their applications, and we have the right to provide our own critique. And so that was disappointing. The other thing that was disappointing about the process was the fact that it wasn't clear what the metrics were when they decided to cut funding from long-standing organizations that were doing great work in our community and shift those funds to new organizations and new programs. I think what really needs to happen in that process is that we need to have full transparency. If we're going to have another group who's going to provide recommendations and input on this, then it's great that we're able to have those recommendations, but we need to be the ones who are also reviewing those applications and understanding what are the needs of these organizations, because we saw a lot of funding get cut. And one thing that I tried to do as a city council member was say, hey, at a minimum, at the city level, let's find the funds to be able to keep these organizations whole for at least a year. And the council majority voted against that and only went to support them for 3 months. That's not acceptable.
You voted against that. You voted against that. Your vote was against.
No, my vote was to support those funding for those programs for up to a year.
Right.
We were voted against, and the vote was for 3 months,
Right.
which I did support
I was
as
trying to
well.
clarify that. Okay. Shebreh, if you could just answer that other question that we didn't get to that point about.
I thought it was specific to.
It was, but,
Justin,
okay,
so
the other
can you
question,
read-
you're
Yeah,
correct.
so
You are correct.
I wasn't paying
I had a
attention to that
slightly
part,
different
'cause-
question worded for you. You are correct. So, but the question is there an example for you of a time when you took a stand for a principle and didn't vote with the majority? Was there anything that you stood up to that for you was really something that was your principle that was not what the majority voted?
I mean, I can say that I stood with my principles and my values on every vote that I've taken on the city council. And in the last year and a half, 2 years that I've been on city council, that's been aligned with my colleagues.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about the benchlands. The city voted to close it, the largest homeless encampment in the community. It's clearing it right now, and we have seen this cycle happen before in our community. And despite all the money, we have $14 million that we've talked about from state funding, there's lots of money that we've thrown at this homeless problem, but we seem to still not be getting around it, getting our arms around it. Less than a third of the people that we've spoken to at Lookout, of the unhoused who have been cleared out, are actually taking the city up on the offer of housing. So is that a successful program? Can you talk about that? And I am confused who's starting.
I don't know. I think I went first on the core.
Okay, Justin, you're starting. Thank you.
This is interesting.
It's not supposed to be easy.
No, it's not. I understand.
And this is a hard problem. So, but is this success? Is this, are we edging towards success? This number, what we're doing here.
Well, I think over the past, since 2020, we've been making a lot of positive strides forward. We have seen, during 2020, when I was mayor, we had more homeless services that were stood up than any other point in time in the history of the community. And I actually helped open up the Armory at that time with going and meeting with members of the community who would have been impacted by that, and really supporting our city manager at the time and the work that they were doing to get the Armory open. Because since then, we now have that as one of our sites for addressing homelessness and where people can be sheltered. We're not going to have, capacity for every single person who's experiencing homelessness in Santa Cruz. It's a huge challenge, but what we're making progress on is trying to get those people who want help into shelter, and for those who don't want help, we're really sending the message of like, hey, we're a compassionate community, but we really are here to support those who want to take the help and improve their lives. I think that as we're moving forward, however, we do need to figure out systems, and this is where the 24/7 emergency crisis response comes in. We need people who can go out and engage with the people in our community who are experiencing homelessness, who may have mental health issues and are not deciding for themselves to take shelter, or who may be deciding to camp and go other places, because it's that engagement oftentimes and building relationships with people that can help them decide whether or not they want to get into programs and services. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done, but I think one of the best things that we've been able to do is demonstrate programs that have worked. And as county supervisor, what I want to do is take that to the community and show them what works on homelessness here.
Deborah?
So I do want to clarify, in 2020, the homelessness services that were stood up by the city were mandated by the state because of the COVID shelter-in-place mandates, and really managed by the county. And I know that because I was invited to join the emergency response team to stand up shelter-in-place sites for youth and young adults during that time. I wouldn't call it a success, but I would call it progress. I had the opportunity to walk through the benchlands before we started to close it, and no one should be living in those conditions. Absolutely not under my watch. It's unacceptable. And it's unacceptable for the neighboring community members, the seniors who live across the street, to be impacted the way that they have been. We have had 150 people in safe shelters, 12 people permanently housed, 25 to 30 people in safe parking. That's aside from the benchlands closure. People connected to employment and people connected to services. It's a start, and the city cannot do it alone. And this is what I've been working actively on right now as a council member with some of my supervisor colleagues to, again, expand these outside of District 3 and in other areas of our community. One last thing is that the $6 million grant I mentioned earlier, part of that is to have public defender workers go out into the benchlands or other encampments and go out with their tablets and do diversion and prevention right there and then. So that's the connection that we need to make between city and county.
Thank you. One of our audience is asking about what to do about the homeless individuals who refuse services again and again and again and again.
You keep trying again and again and again and again. If there is a safety issue to the individual themselves or others in the community, then we have to connect with public safety. But you continue to try with case management and people who are professionals in the field. I know that there are some policy decisions being made at the state around conservatorship. It's policy decisions that are not funded and they are not built. They don't build our community capacity to respond. But we just need to make sure that that individual is if they are not safe, if they are harm to themselves or the community, then we need to address that immediately. If they are not, then we continue with professionals in the field that connect with them. Every touch point makes a difference.
Well, I think it depends on the circumstances and the situation, because there are people in this community who are homeless and who are not having an impact on our environment or on our community. And you might be encountering them from time to time, but are they having a negative impact on our community? If the answer is no, then I'm not sure what we need to do in those circumstances. But one of the things I will say is that when I've talked to people in the past who grew up in Santa Cruz, they'll say, yeah, there was this one homeless guy, and we knew who he was, and he would just go get drinks, but he never bothered anybody, right? And so I think what this comes down to is behavior. If people are negatively impacting our community, then we have to do something about it. I know that there are business people here in this room who've said, this person has drug dealers that are coming up, I need my RV moved. This RV moved because they're threatening my business, they're threatening my customers. And it's yes, that's when we need to involve law enforcement. That's a problem. As a housed person, I can't go and do those kinds of things. So we have to have the same standard for people who are housed as the people who are unhoused. That's number one, because if someone's homeless and they're living in their car because they can't afford to live here, but they're not having a negative impact, then why are we bothering that person? If we can connect them to services, great, but we need to create those services and those structures for those people to be able to have the support that they need in the circumstances that they're in. And so I guess, and then if people need, for example, addiction services or mental health, we need more mental health beds, we know that. I think that we should create certain, if it's a transitional encampment or a short place for shelter that's specific for people with mental health needs, let's do that. Let's create programs and services for people who are experiencing addiction, but we have to triage this whole, we can't treat everybody the same.
Do you think that you guys agree pretty much on homelessness, or do you think there are big differences?
That depends.
I'll ask
That
okay,
depends.
so Shebreh, what are your let's hear the differences between you guys.
You're trying to get us going, aren't you?
I want you to talk.
Well, clearly we voted differently on the city council. You know, my approach has been to not shy away from making hard decisions. There is no silver bullet solution, but we cannot stand idle. This problem has grown to the extent that it has because we have for too long. And we've done this for too long. We've blamed each other and we've said we don't have enough, and you know, there's a narrative of not enough and it's not my responsibility. It's all of our responsibility. So yes, my approach has been different.
Justin?
I'm going to use two examples of two contrasting and different city councils. In 2019, when I was elected to the city council, there were two other members of the city council on the board at that time, Chris Crown and Drew Glover. And one of the things that they wanted to do immediately out the gate was to address homelessness. And so they brought forward a proposal of a bunch of different items on homelessness, and we're like, no, we're going to start we're standing up transitional encampments, we're going to go put RV parking on Delaware, and people lost their minds. And the big reason why was because nobody went to those communities first to discuss with them what they wanted to do and what they wanted to stand up. Flash forward, 2021, we have a new council, and I'm in the minority on that council. And once again, we saw proposals being brought forward in such a way that the community had no idea what was going on and what was being proposed. The temporary outdoor living ordinance was one of those proposals, and as people started learning more about it, they said, wait, we're gonna put homeless people in our open space if there's no shelter beds. We're gonna put homeless people in industrial areas, and those industrial areas are in our neighborhoods. And people, again, lost their minds. Why? Because nobody went to those communities and spoke with them first about those proposals. My approach is, and this is something that worked with Prospect Heights, we went to the community and we sat down and we had a meeting with the neighbors who were gonna be impacted. We heard their concerns and we listened to them, and we made sure that those concerns were addressed. And since we've stood at the Armory, we haven't had a single complaint from those neighbors. That's the process that I do to try to get things to work, and that's how I'm effective at being in local government.
So I would ask, when there was a council majority with my opponent, why there were no action taken and no solutions put forward. So that's a question. We have used the crutch of community engagement to not make decisions. We engaged in a year-long strategic plan in 2017 and had a 3-year strategic plan that was passed. Then we had the Catch community group that was formed. And we had the 3-year county strategic plan that engaged did city focus groups and worked with city constituents. So we've been talking about this issue for a long time. No one's losing their mind when we have stood up transitional shelter that have safely housed 150 people. No one's losing their mind when we have safe parking program that currently is housing 25 to 30 vehicles. But when I knock on doors, people are losing their minds that nothing has been done. People are very frustrated from the spectrum. You know, I talk to moms, I talk to seniors, I talk to every one person. I'm afraid that Santa Cruz has lost its compassion because we've been in inaction for so long. That's not acceptable.
And once again, I will point out that in 2019, there were numerous proposals brought to the city council on different types of models for addressing homelessness. There were multiple models on transitional encampments that were brought forward, safe parking, and I will point this out.
I'm just going to do a few more seconds on this, and we're going to move on. So just your answer, and then I think it's your.
No, she answered.
She started.
First,
okay, she
yeah.
goes first. Sorry.
This is
Keep
mine,
going.
yeah.
You're in rebuttal. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm confused.
So we had stood up. We were the members of the city council at the time were trying to set up transitional encampments. They brought those proposals forward. So I would give them some credit to the fact that we've actually stood those up today, because there was a lot of work done on that. Same thing with safe parking. I would like to point out that safe parking programs existed before I was on the city council. There were already safe parking programs through the AFC. And so let's not think that we never had safe parking programs in the city before 2020, or 2021, I'm sorry. And furthermore, when it comes to the Catch, one of the complaints that some of the members of the Catch made was that what they had recommended was not what the direction that the city took. And furthermore, I think that we really need to be, one of the downsides of that is that we're not listening to the community and what they're recommending when we're implementing new policies. So, and I can't remember the full question, but I think that.
I think you guys got it.
Yeah.
I just have to
Okay,
say.
one quick thing, then I have one more.
Yeah.